guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today I am doing my most disappointing books of 2019. So a couple of caveats here. I am slightly under the weather, I'm exhausted, and I'm a little bit grumpy. And I usually try to not film in these conditions. I feel kind of like a swamp witch from a fairy tale that like eats children. But I figured this was kind of the perfect time to film this video because I'm usually really positive and I'm always constructive when I talk about the negatives of books, or try to be constructive. And I'm gonna be constructive here, but I'm also gonna be a bit saltier than I usually am. The tea shall be spilt, etc., etc. And yeah, so this may be a little bit of a grumpier version of me than you're used to, but I'm sure that everyone will think it's really fun. So also, a lot of these books are, I think, quite popular. So if they're your favorites, obviously y'all are smart and beautiful and wonderful. You know that. Just because I don't like a book doesn't mean literally anything at all. So don't get mad. Just skip. Also, there are going to be some spoilery bits for some of these books, just because I don't think I can talk about why I'm really disappointed with them without talking about some of the things that actually happen, maybe even towards the end. But I will say when I'm going to get to a spoilery section, and I will put a timestamp on the screen so you can skip that. So if you haven't read some of these books, you're not going to get spoiled so long as you skip ahead to the bit where the timestamp says you should skip to. We should all be good. So I think I'm going to do this in order from sort of the least disappointing to the most disappointing, because there's definitely a most disappointing book. Some of you may know what that is. It did get launched into the camera by accident during one of these videos. And just because a book is disappointing doesn't mean that, you know, it's automatically like a 1-star or something. Actually, my first book that I'm going to talk about is a 3-star read. It's just that that happened to not be what I was expecting. So these will range from 3 stars all the way to 1 star. I, for the most part, if you have seen my best books of 2019 video, loved what I read this year. I read a lot of really good stuff, and I read some stuff that I particularly didn't like. So let's go ahead and celebrate the disappointing books right now. So the very first book that I wanted to talk about is The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. So this is obviously a hugely hyped book for a lot of people. It is the end to a very, very popular YA trilogy, and this is the 3-star one. I didn't hate it, obviously. I found it satisfying enough, but, and this will be the case with another book later on, I feel like these were not the characters that I came to know throughout the course of the trilogy. And I feel like she really cut corners in a lot of way. And I don't know if this is because she wrote and released this book a lot earlier than she intended to. It was originally announced actually for this month, for January of 2020, but they bumped it forward to November of 2019 because I guess the book was ready. I don't know if there's any, like, reason for that other than she happened to have the book done, or if maybe she rushed it and that's why this book felt really rushed. I don't really know. I'm just speculating. This book follows a character named Jude, and when she was a child, her mother's first husband, who is a redcap, which is a type of fairy, murders her mother and father and takes her and her 2 sisters into the land of fairy to raise them as his own, as a way to kind of like make up for the fact that he killed their parents and stuff. So they are living this kind of like strange life as mortals in fairy, and she grows up to be basically a really cold-hearted and kind of cruel person, constantly sort of mocked and belittled because she is mortal, and this kind of leads to other things. So I think this is the point where I'm going to put the timestamp on the screen, because I am going to talk about some of the events that happen in this book. So go ahead and skip to that point if you don't want to hear anything about sort of the stuff that happens in The Queen of Nothing. I'll let people skip. Right. So I feel like the Jude in this book and the Cardon in this book were not the people that I came to know, especially after the insanity of The Wicked King. The Wicked King was batshit and I loved it. It was so much fun. So The Cruel Prince I thought was okay. It was a really fun and fast read. I read it while we were moving house actually, so it was kind of the perfect time for that. And I thought it was okay. I thought it was fine, but I loved the ending. And I was hoping that if that kind of energy kept up into the second book, that it would be brilliant. And it was. I love The Wicked King. It is one of my best books of 2019. And something happened between The Wicked King and The Queen of Nothing, where we went from this all the way up to this and then back down again. She did not manage, in my mind, to keep that kind of energy and excitement and like insane plotting up, which was really a shame because I loved how dark and crazy and backstabby, literally, and awful everyone was in The Wicked King. So this came as a big disappointment to me because I feel like she just, like, forgot about what she wrote in The Wicked King. I feel like she forgot what her characters did, and we sort of reverted to almost a different storyline with kind of the curse and everything. The whole banishment from Fairy just didn't matter at all. I had assumed that it would have a point, and it had literally no point, because she just waltzes back in. What's the point? So that was a big disappointment. That's really the place where I feel like she cut a lot of corners. Then we have the curse thing, which was kind of weird, and then we have this sort of quasi-redemption of Cardon, and it just didn't fit, and it didn't work well for me. And while the ending and everything was cute, it wasn't what I was expecting from this book because of the way she had set it up. I'm dropping stuff left and right. I'm gesticulating too much. So I don't really know what the hell happened in Queen of Nothing. It was fine. It was okay. And, you know, it was readable, and I thought that in terms of sort of the ending of a trilogy, it was fine. All the loose ends got wrapped up and everything as far as I was concerned, but it was fine. It should have been awesome. The next book on this list I feel like is kind of partially my fault because I read YA contemporary and that's just not really my genre of choice. I thought it'd be really fun. I had not high expectations, but I had expectations for this book, and it like was every bad American stereotype out there, which just maybe it's a personal thing, but it made me like hate America and Americans, and I'm American, by the way. So this is Royals by Rachel Hawkins, or I think it's Prince Charming it's been rebranded as. So a quick moment. I feel like being an American living in the UK, you see a lot of the stereotypes that people think of Americans, and for sure there's some just awful, annoying people out there from America and all of that, and, you know, blah, 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 blah. But I really struggled with this book partially because, to me, it enforced every single bad stereotype about Americans, especially Americans abroad, and it made me furiously angry, and I feel like she should have done better. Basically, this book is about a girl named Daisy. I think she's like 16 or so. And she finds out that her older sister, who has been dating the Prince of Scotland, because apparently Scotland has princes, they do not. She's been dating the Prince of Scotland, and they have been engaged to get married, and there's going to be a royal wedding and everything. So her family is going to get like sucked into this madness of a royal wedding and all of that. So the best way I feel like I can frame this is, you know, movies like What a Girl Wants with Amanda Bynes is like a perfect example of this, or The Princess Diaries with Anne Hathaway. You have these characters who are taken from a ordinary life into a foreign country to a kind of elevated lifestyle, and they screw up a lot, and like everything is, you know, people misinterpret them and think that they're gonna be really terrible at stuff, but they prove everyone wrong in the end, especially What a Girl Wants. Perfect example. And this book does the opposite of that. Instead of proving everyone wrong, she proves every single person who doubts her and who dislikes her and thinks that she's crass and awful and disrespectful, she proves them right. And that's a big failing for a book like this, because I don't think that was the intention of the author. I don't know why it would have been an intention of the author, so I just assume it's not. What the fuck happened in this book? It made me so angry. I don't know why I finished it. It made me so angry to read it, because Daisy is awful. She's super disrespectful of another country's culture. She's awful. She's just like, if I had, say, like, I don't know, a niece or something like Daisy, she would be in so much trouble for all the shit that she pulls. Like, maybe I'm just too old for this, but I like a lot of YA books. I don't think it's that I'm too old. It might be that I'm too old, though. I don't know. Anyway, this book actually received my very, very first 1-star rating because I was so angry at it. I felt like I had wasted a lot of time. I was so mad at this author who reportedly loves Britain and British culture. She should have done so much better, and I hated this book and I hated Daisy, like, passionately, in case you can't tell. My next book is one that I didn't finish. And I decided to not put any DNFs on this list, except for this one, because I had such high hopes for it because this author wrote one of my favorite books of 2018. This is 9 Perfect Strangers by Liane Moriarty. I made it about halfway through this book, and I was kind of buddy reading it with one of my real life friends. She finished it, so she got to fill me in. I skimmed the last half, and it's bullshit. I don't know what happened with this book, because Big Little Lies is an amazing book, and it got all of this hype, all of this crazy amounts of attention. It has the TV show and everything, and it was really good. It's a great book. You should definitely read that if you haven't already. But I think something happened here. I think that Liane Moriarty, this is complete speculation, may have gotten kind of the J.K. Rowling Robert Galbraith treatment, where I feel like if you read Lethal White by Robert Galbraith, it was like 600 pages long because no one bothered to edit it, because it's such a popular author. It was going to get pushed out really quickly. It was going to sell 1 million copies anyway. I feel like that's kind of what happened here, because 9 Perfect Strangers does not feel like a complete book. It feels like a really, really rough first draft. So 9 Perfect Strangers involves 9 strangers who come to this super exclusive, super posh health resort in Australia. And they're all there for different reasons. Some people are recovering from trauma and from grief. There's one woman who, she's a writer and her career is kind of tanking, and she's just been out of this really terrible relationship, all of this stuff. And they go to this health retreat. And everything starts out kind of normal, and then it gets weirder and weirder and weirder and more sinister. So, yeah. I feel like the first bit was pretty good, because that's what, I don't know, I would imagine what you're selling your book on. So I feel like that was pretty good, and that was tidied up and everything. But as soon as they got there, and basically one of the kind of treatments is that you can't speak. You're not allowed to speak. And once people couldn't speak, it got really weird. There's even like, okay, this is the point where I will put in the timestamp things. So if you don't want any spoilers for this book, go ahead and skip a little bit. I'll wait. Okay, so there's like a whole LSD sequence because they're spiking their like green smoothies with LSD without their consent. And there's like genuinely like a 15-page sequence of all of them just being really high and rolling on the floor and like hallucinating. And I feel like it kind of like, I don't think it broke the fourth wall, but it was really kind of weird and trying to be meta, and it just did not work at all. And now that we've got the timestamp thing up, I feel like I can talk about all of this. There's one point where like they get locked in a room without food and water, and they're like desperately trying to figure out how to break out, but the door was unlocked the whole time. But it's like 50 pages of them being stuck in this fucking room and arguing with each other. I just didn't see the point of this book. And at the very end, so like one of the characters is really, really against drugs because I think his sister died of a drug overdose, and he's been spiked with LSD and just like doesn't care at the end. Like everyone gets out of this resort and basically lives happily ever after. Like this was a good thing that happened to them. It's so weird. I have no idea what happened here. And I feel like one of the brilliant things about Big Little Lies is that she takes these three women and sort of you have these expectations of what they'll be like, and she totally flips that on its head, and you end up loving the people that you didn't think you would like. And the woman who has the perfect life actually doesn't have the perfect life. The super annoying PTA mom is like the nicest person in the world. The single mother has a lot of kind of undercurrents to her relationship with her child and everything like that that you wouldn't expect, and it's brilliant. It's so good. And I feel like she did the first half of that. She gave you a bunch of expectations and then she never subverted them. So she keeps talking about how disgusting this woman who's had plastic surgery is. She keeps talking about the pathetic romance novelist, and it's just weird. It's super, super bizarre. I feel like with a lot of work this could have been a really good book, but I don't think anyone wanted to put the work in. Complete speculation, I'm being mean, but this book made no sense. The next book on this list is a funny one, because sort of like the Folk of the Air series that I talked about at the beginning with The Queen of Nothing, this series started out really mediocre, and then the second book was really good, and then this last one just completely tanked for me. This is The Toll by Neil Shusterman. So this is the last book in the Arc of the Scythe trilogy, starting with Scythe, which was okay. I really love the concept of the scythes and the scythedom and humanity having evolved past the point of dying. They basically have cured death. So for population control, there are these people called scythes, and they're like an organization, kind of its own self-governing body, and they kill people with their kind of daily quotas and all of this and da-da-da-da-da. So we have these two characters, Citra and Rowan, who become apprentice scythes in the first book, and it's like the worst, most boring romance ever. It's like watching two bits of cardboard try to romance each other. They're so boring. They're so flat. They're just the worst. In Thunderhead, we still have Rowan, which is kind of unfortunate, but Citra is amazing, and she kind of comes out of her shell a lot, and she becomes this brilliant character, and I loved everything that was happening in that book. It was so, so, so good. Then we get to The Toll. What happened in this book? I feel like he had a million ideas for what this book should have been and what he wanted to include, and instead of editing them down and maybe being like, I will put these 3 main ideas in, he was like, I'm gonna put these 15 main ideas in. This book is huge. It is unnecessarily long. It's mad. Some of the stuff that happens in this is crazy to me. This was like 3 different books in one, and all the characters were running into each other's stories, and it just made no sense. And I kind of enjoyed that. But at the same time, it was really disappointing because that second book, Thunderhead, is really good. Okay, timestamp time. So go ahead and skip to the timestamp on the screen down below. Okay, so Scythes in Space? What? That was not what I was expecting from this book. And normally, like, I'm all for blank in space. I love space. I love sci-fi. I love, like, you know, shoot me into space. I would love to go to space. But it made no sense. Absolutely no sense. None whatsoever. I was just like, I was listening to the audiobook and I was like, surely not. Surely we are not going into space. Surely not. No, we did go into space. And, like, and there were parts of this book that I did genuinely like. I really enjoyed Citra's investigation and kind of a slow trickle release of information to the people through her like video broadcasts and everything. And I was really intrigued by Goddard and his involvement in the space program and everything, and the reason why we didn't go to space earlier and all of that. But like, why are they building spaceships? It makes no sense. What else do we have in this book? I don't even remember what else happened in this book because I'm so, like, caught up on Scythes in Space. Oh my god, okay, so we have Goddard, who comes back in the second book, I think, which was kind of disappointing. This is the only thing I didn't like about that book, other than Rowan. just really hate Rowan. Because I wanted like a cooler villain, and I was like, okay, so he's pretty evil in the first one, which is cool. I like that. But because he gets put into Tiger's body, and Tiger's like this party boy, you know, teenager, he just acted like a petulant child. He wasn't a good villain. He wasn't the Goddard that we deserved, you know? And I feel like it just was watching someone throw a temper tantrum for 600 pages, which is really boring. I don't want to watch someone have a temper tantrum for 600 pages. It's meant to be like this mastermind, and I know it's not technically like him and everything like that. I mean, like, he's supposed to be this incredibly brilliant man who, like, destroyed mankind's hopes of going to, like, space and colonizing the moon and everything. And he's, like, throwing temper tantrums and, like, having a dick measuring contest with Rowan the entire time. And it makes no sense. None. What happened? I don't even know. This book is very confusing to me. My second to last book is one that I desperately wanted to love. Like, so badly. And I feel like when I finished this book and closed it, I was like, oh, that's why I don't finish series. Because this was so disappointing. What the hell happened? It's Dark Dawn by Jay Kristoff. So this is the final book in the Nevernight Chronicles, which is a hugely popular series here on BookTube. And oh man, for me, Nevernight and Godsgrave are so good. They're basically perfect for me. They're exactly what I wanted. Foul-mouthed, sweary assassin who actually does assassiny things. Doesn't really seem to regret the whole murder thing, which is great. I love that. He had a sassy cat friend, like, awesome. Super fun. Really loved those first two books, and I was desperate to get my hands on Dark Dawn because Godsgrave has this incredible cliffhanger. And I'm not someone who falls for cliffhangers, really. I'll be like, oh wow, look at that, and then move on to the next book. I was desperate to find out what was going to happen in Dark Dawn, and when I finally got to it, I was just like, a lot of this, for me, and this is no knock on fanfiction whatsoever, but for me, this felt like a kind of mediocre fanfiction version of Nevernight. Someone who was desperate to find out what was going to happen at the end, got really frustrated, and then wrote a sort of fanfiction ending. Because this didn't feel like Jay Kristoff at all. These were not the characters that I have grown to love. This was certainly not Mia. This was not the story that I was promised. I don't know what the hell happened here, but it just imploded at the end for me. Okay, this is the point where I'm going to put the thingy on the screen and you can go ahead and skip because this is going to be a bit of a rant. So go ahead, skip to the timestamp because this is definitely going to be super spoilery. So go ahead, do the thing. This was not the story that I was promised. I wanted my amazing story of revenge because the revenge plot is the best thing, and when the revenge plot is done really, really, really well, it's like the most satisfying, best reading experience ever. And we started to kind of shift in Godsgrave to a more sort of proper fantasy with like gods and stuff. And that's fine, but I feel like Jay Kristoff just crumpled up all of the bits that had to do with the actual revenge plot, threw it out a window in Venice somewhere, because it's apparently where he wrote a lot of this book, and just decided to write something else instead. So in this, I feel like Mia, especially, is someone who is such a strong character and has such a strong kind of personality. You know exactly who you're reading, and you get to know her really well because she does feel really unique. And one of the things that I loved about her, which I have very rarely read before, in fact, I think I've only read it once before, and that was in Best Served Cold by Joe Abercrombie, which is a great book, by the way. I feel like I had her in my head as an assassin, murdery person who, although she was tired and she was exhausted and this is like a many years long, quest for revenge, I had her in my head as someone who would follow through, I had her in my head as someone who killed because it was what she had to do. And when she started getting soppy about it, I was just like, no, I really wanted her to continue to be like, you know what, I'm gonna kill people. It's not great. It's not gonna be a great life, but because I'm having this quest for revenge, it's what I got to do. And I feel like, I can't remember a specific part or anything, so maybe I'm making this up, but I feel like that didn't follow through in this book, and that made me really disappointed. Also, like, your best friend since childhood, he may be a snarky ass shadow cat, sarcastic little bastard, but when she sent him away? No. What? That made absolutely no sense in my mind. In my mind, that is not something that Mia would have done. And you know, okay, of course an author would know their characters better than I would. However, I feel like he just completely, like, failed to stick the landing of her character arc and her story. And she can absolutely change and evolve over the course of the story, absolutely, and she should. But I feel like he almost, like, wimped out on her character and, like, wanted her to show weakness, but did it in just the wrong ways for me. So that kind of sucked. Also, why the hell is Third Wheel Trick here? I was so happy when he died in the first book, when he gets stabbed, and then he gets brought back. Obviously he was brought back in the second one, but like, why do you have to hang out so much? I liked him better when he was dead. He's just the worst. He adds nothing to the story. He adds no value to the story except to make her be like, ooh, maybe I like him, instead of Ashlyn, who's literally the best. The best. Anyway, there were some bits of this book that I did like. I really enjoyed the reveal of the mysterious narrator, and I enjoyed everything that had to do with the library. I enjoyed how meta it was with kind of all of those revelations and stuff. That was brilliant, but unfortunately that was such a small percentage of this book that I this just didn't work for me, and I wish I hadn't read it. And finally, my most disappointing book of 2019 is The Calculating Stars by Mary Robinette Kowal. So I think this is probably going to be really polarizing as well as a lot of these other ones, because this is such a beloved book for a lot of people, but for some reason this one just didn't work for me. And it's funny because I literally, like, when I was unhauling it, I accidentally threw it at the camera, which shows you how much I really didn't enjoy that book. But it's still one that I recommend to other people because I do think I'm very much in the minority. I think I'm just being a picky, snippy person and not enjoying this, but there was something about this book that just completely rubbed me the wrong way, and it made me furious. The Calculating Stars follows a character whose name I can't even remember, and she wants to be the first lady astronaut in this kind of alternate timeline of the US. And in the very beginning of the book, an asteroid strikes the Earth. I think it's the 1950s. The Earth is hit by this asteroid and kind of it triggers this global climate event. So basically, in a few years' time, Earth's gonna be unlivable. We are gonna have to start experimenting with sending people into space. She wants to be the first lady astronaut. Great. I don't know what it was about this book that rubbed me the wrong way so badly. I couldn't get on board with this one, which sucks because it should be everything that I love, and it just didn't work. I'm pulling up my Goodreads review because I've mostly tried to blast this book out of my brain, just like what's-her-face leaving the atmosphere. Okay, what's her name? I don't even know what her name is. I don't think I ever wrote it down. Elma York, that's her name. Okay, so I think that part of my problem is I listened to the audiobook, which the author narrates, which I didn't enjoy. I think that a bad audiobook narrator can ruin a book and kind of reading experience for sure. And while I know a lot of people really love her narration, I thought it wasn't very good. I felt like she had this incredibly patronizing tone, especially further and further into the book, and that really grated on me a lot. So this might have been different if I had read the physical book. But I'm just looking at this review, trying to remind myself of what happened. Okay, so Part of my problem with the audiobook is that this book has a really, really diverse cast, which is awesome, despite the fact that we only get Elma's point of view, which is super annoying, because there are these amazing women in this book, and they're totally sidelined, especially the characters of color. I totally get her wanting to include them in everything and have a diverse book, but to me they felt almost like window dressings. They had almost no sort of point, and I think that because they should have been so amazing, and some of them were really, really phenomenal, especially kind of the women who she begins to inspire to want to fly and be pilots and be astronauts, were so cool. And I feel like the book really would have benefited from having their points of view as well, instead of this one really, really boring woman. And that was really a shame, but because there is this diverse cast of characters, she did a lot of accents, which were really rough. And maybe I'm just being overly sensitive or whatever, but it was really awkward to listen to her do all these accents. It was really rough. It was bad. I think that my biggest problem with the book was definitely Elma, the character herself, and because we get this from the first person point of view, having a character that you don't like really sucks. So it was almost as though she was written in such a way that, like, I would be forced to love her. I know that makes absolutely no sense, but it was very like, you know, she's this feminist, sexy, sassy woman. She has sex with her husband all the time. She's got anxiety. You must love her because she's like the perfect character. And something about that just made me really mad. It made me be like, no, don't tell me what to do. I hate her. So it's probably just a personal problem. I don't like being told what to do. But I felt like she was just so one-dimensional because she was almost like just this collection of characteristics mashed into the form of a human being, but she had no soul to her. She had no life to her, which was really, really disappointing. And also, she has like the most awful relationship with her husband, and that I mean she has a really nice relationship with her husband. And I saw the author. She apparently really loves to pull people's 1-star reviews and bitch people out for their opinions on her book, so that's great. But I remember her pulling someone's criticism of like the really, really like nice relationship between the main character and her husband, being like, we're so used to having awful relationships and all that. And my problem, because I hated that relationship, wasn't that they were supportive and everything. Obviously, like, I'm happily married and everything. I like good relationships, and it's not like me being bitter or anything like that. But there was something about the two of them that felt so false and so flat, and like, she could do no wrong. And it was just, something about it was so unbelievable. I'm like, yes, give me more supportive husbands, give me more like beta male characters and all of that, great, please, but write them really well. Write them in an interesting way, because the most interesting thing about this couple is they like to suck on each other's toes and say things like, I'm ready for blast off, when they're gonna have sex. Like, it's awful. And this is probably the thing that I had the biggest issue with, but feel kind of uncomfortable talking about, because anxiety is a very personal thing, and I'm sure that the author suffers from anxiety because it's such a present thing in the book. And I know that people will struggle with anxiety in different ways. So the way that I suffer from anxiety is going to be very different from the next person and all of that. However, the anxiety representation in this book felt so false, and it felt so flat, and there was just something about it that didn't, it felt like someone looking up a very short encyclopedia definition of what anxiety is and then trying to build a character around that. Basically, she barfs a lot. She vomits, like, a lot. Like, she vomits all the time. She vomits, like, all over her husband's office. She's barfing everywhere. She's just vomiting constantly in this book, and that's how her anxiety manifests. And that just didn't ring true. And I say that I feel uncomfortable about talking about this particular part because I'm sure that maybe it does ring true to her, or to, you know, if she doesn't have anxiety, to maybe someone she knows, but it just didn't feel real. It didn't feel like it was being written by someone who knew what they were talking about, which is such a shame. And that's the thing that I feel really bad about saying about this book. Basically, I wanted a super kick-ass, amazing story about female astronauts smashing the patriarchy and being super awesome and being friends, and that's not what I got. I got a patronizing load of toe sucking, and it made me really upset. So, those are my most disappointing books of 2019. I definitely ranted and raged a lot more than I thought I would. I'm probably gonna have to cut this down because there's a lot of ranting, but while I read a lot of amazing stuff in 2019, I also read some stuff that was not so good. And that's a real shame, because a lot of these books I really, really desperately wanted to love, especially books like Dark Dawn and The Calculating Stars. They were just so disappointing to me. I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. In the comments below, let me know if you've read any of these books, if you have the same opinions as me, if you maybe have a different opinion from me. I'll be respectful here, even though I just raged about a bunch of books. Definitely let me know what you thought. Also, let me know what your most disappointing books of 2019 were. I post bookish content to this channel fairly frequently, so go ahead and hit subscribe, check back soon, and I will see you next time.